Hey everybody, it is your girl, Rhea Ray Harris Yarbrough, coming to you via IntellectualRadio.com, an iHeartRadio station on the Quintessential Queens podcast. Now, I have not been in this seat for a little while, but the last time that I was supposed to be here, we were having a conversation scheduled, basically talking about started from the bottom, now we're here. Those of you a little bit older and familiar with that song, and Miss Renetta Gunn Stevens was one of the guests. Well, I'm doing part two, which for me is actually part one and part two since I was not able to participate. But give a warm, happy welcome to my guest, Renetta Gunn Stevens. How are you today, madam?
I am doing wonderful, Queen.
Awesome, awesome. So now, so many people are convinced, because I know this is how it is in England, where you are born, whatever station that is in life, that's where you stay until death for the most part. But allegedly, in these United States, it's supposed to be a little bit different. But a lot of times it doesn't play out that way. A lot of times people tend to stay in the same environment, do the same thing, operate in the same type of frame as their predecessors. But you have been a little bit different. So let's start out by telling our guests where you are from originally.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for just having this conversation and having me on the show to speak about this subject matter. So, I am originally from Chicago. I was born in the Cabrini Green projects. In this part of Cabrini Green I was born in is called the row houses. And so that's where I'm originally from.
So, for those of you that are not a part of our Chicagoland audiences, Cabrini Green was one of the more infamous housing developments on the north side of Chicago. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a long time since I've watched Good Times. It's been a very long time. Wasn't Cabrini Green a part of the backdrop for Good Times when they did the opening, ran the opening credits, etc.?
Correct.
All right, thought I was right on that. So, in growing up in Cabrini Green, because I'm going to double back to where I'm coming from with this question after you answer it.
hmm
What were your expectations for yourself?
Well, when I was growing up in Cabrini Green, I was born there, so I was very young. So I didn't have any expectations per se, but what I did experience was community. So if there was any expectations, I just expected to be safe, and I was safe. So even though many may have perceived it to be an unsafe space, when I was growing up there, it was a community. It was a sea of faces that looked just like mine. It was, you could trust your neighbor to make sure that if you had to walk home late, you were going to get there safely. That's what I experienced, and that's what I expected.
And I asked you that question because even now in almost 2025, look how the time flies. Chicago has the dubious distinction of being one of, if not the most segregated major city in the country.
Mhm.
And not only are we segregated by race/ethnicity,
Mhm.
we also are typically segregated by socioeconomic class groups. And when I've talked with people from all different walks of life in their childhood experiences, depending on where they were,
Mhm.
those that had a little more quote unquote middle class upbringing had a very different experience as far as what they were expected to become
Mhm.
and what they were encouraged to do versus those that had a more working class background. Was that your experience? And I mean, in the school systems where you would go for neighborhood trips, etc.
Yeah. For me, It was more like Head Start. And then I went to Mulligan School, which was going into the Gold Coast on Sheffield Street. Growing up at that young age, there really wasn't any expectations as far as like, well, this is what you can be, this is what you can't be. I will say though, there was not conversations about it. So it was almost assumed that you didn't think about like what do you want to be when you grow up? Or let's start looking at your skill sets that we see you're doing now, your superpowers, and see can we cultivate it. So it wasn't any of those instances that I can remember someone saying, she liked to talk a lot. Maybe she's a communicator. You almost got reprimanded for your superpowers, and they wasn't observed as this is something that we should really begin to invest in.
Now, I talked a lot too. And and it was always on my little report card.
Mm-hmm.
Great student talks too much. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness. And I don't think it was necessarily something that was enriched or cultivated for myself either. But having grown up and this is another Chicago debate, there is an East Side people. But having grown up on the Southeast Side,
Mm-hmm.
which is east of Jeffrey Boulevard, for those of you that are familiar, there were expectations
Mm-hmm.
that we would not just graduate from high school, we would graduate from college and have a quote unquote professional job, mm, white collar ish
Mm-hmm.
at least, and more than likely go on to further your education, get master's degrees, etc. And that was kind of felt early on, almost to the point where for some people it was a pressure. It was
Mm-hmm.
a pressure to do those things and to make those achievements, even if that was not necessarily what, if you would have asked them, was on their radar that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because that expectation was, again, we lived in this box in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and for you to stay in this box, you have to achieve X, Y, and Z.
Wow.
So it had a certain look to it. And my parents, both as educators, taught in more so a working class community, both of them,
Mm-hmm.
even though they were different ethnic groups. My father taught in a primarily Latino community close to 26 in California. For those that don't know where that is, that's the big jail.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother taught in Woodlawn. And although they, as individual teachers, pushed
Mm-hmm.
for their students to have certain opportunities and certain investments in their future, that was not average. And the parents, in a lot of cases, didn't know
Yeah.
that they were options like that. Do you feel like the adults around you had the time and the opportunity to be visionaries for their children?
No, I don't. I think that lies the problem. My mother, she was, in her career, pursuing her career in HR, and my dad worked for the steel mill. So really the only expectation that I even felt from the school was just to have perfect attendance. Like when I look back, that was the expectation. Just go to school. And even as a kid, it was like, just go to school, do what you have to do. Because if you have to have your mom or dad take off work, you're going to get in trouble. And then kind of like the culture was in our school, if you were smart, you would get made fun of. So the smart person, I remember her just crying. Her name was Tammy, but she was the smartest person. But she would cry because they would make fun of her. So in the school that I went to, um, that was really the only expectation to just show up every day, stay out of trouble.
And in the world we're in now, prayerfully, that's a little different
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many different opportunities that are not traditional.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't recall the teasing as a girl for being intelligent or supposedly intelligent. Boys, maybe it was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to Arthur Dixon on 83rd and St. Lawrence, I didn't recognize at the time what was happening. I knew it was a little weird because my then good friend and I went there together. We took the bus together.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got to school, I never saw her again.
Mm-hmm.
because Dixon used, and I'm using this term myself, a tracking method so that outside of homeroom, you only saw certain students all the time, pretty much.
Mm.
So those students that scored higher were in introductory physical science, were in accelerated reading, were in the pre-algebra class.
Yeah.
Those that were considered, quote unquote, in the average range had a whole different set of teachers, not even just classes. They had teachers I never had. So you kind of had that feeling of being separate, even though you were in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations of what we were supposed to achieve were not the same either. And looking back on that, to me,
Mm-hmm.
that was a disservice to both groups
Yes.
because you made one group feel like they were, quote unquote, smarter,
Mm-hmm.
better than one group, and you made the other group feel defensive
Mm-hmm.
because they were not considered to be equal because we were pushed. I went to Whitney Young, for those of you that are from Chicagoland, that's a magnet now selective enrollment school.
Mm-hmm.
And we went with a group. It was a group of us,
Wow.
but we had already all been together anyway at Dixon in these segregated classes.
Wow.
So we didn't go into high school and have to look for friends. We came with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there were other students that maybe only one or two of them came from their school.
Yeah.
Because they were from a school that was either smaller or only pushed the very top students. And that was unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for your environment, now you said you were in the row houses.
Mm-hmm.
My cousins, hey Shalonda,
Mm-hmm.
hey Joseph, were on the row houses on the west side. They grew up on Gladys and Laramie.
Okay.
And I want to say their parents have been there probably 55 years, maybe longer.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, it was again a little bit different, but it was an identifier, meaning, oh, that means that may be not the most economically advanced or safe community.
Mm-hmm.
When you came out of the Cabrini Green neighborhood, did you feel like other people looked at you a particular way from different communities?
I did not. Because same thing, even though we moved out of Cabrini Green, it wasn't that far. We maybe moved 10 blocks away, right on Clybourne and Sheffield, which is right outside of the Cabrini Green area. So we still would see familiar faces. We still hung with the same people. So there wasn't like a new neighborhood that we had to or new neighbors that we had to become friends with. It was still that same group.
Where did you attend high school?
I attended high school at Prosser Vocational. And then I became a teenage mother and had to go to Austin Career Center.
Okay, let's talk about that. See, again,
Mm-hmm.
life was very different when we were in school, and I
Mm-hmm.
was in school before you were. There was pressure at that time. As a matter of fact, I don't think until the early 80s,
Mm.
people were not forced if they became pregnant in high school to attend what we just called in general a pregnant girl school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was you were pressed into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some of my friends in high school that did become pregnant and they did stay at Whitney Young.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little brouhaha from management, as I call them now,
Mm-hmm.
administrative level staffers, but we still looked at them as just our friends and they just happened to be pregnant.
Yeah.
Now, why did you have to go to Austin? Because you were pregnant? Why?
So it wasn't because I was pregnant. I had actually got in trouble when I was at Prosser, taken up for a friend.
Please don't let me, my hat will not let me put my head on the
But
table.
it's life lessons, right? You never fight someone's battle that they're not willing to fight for themselves.
Absolutely.
Right. And so me thinking being a friend is just like taking up for someone. I was in algebra class, and my friend came in and was like, "Somebody tried to jump me in the locker room." And me being the friend, run out of algebra class and go help my friend have a fight. Well, I go to jail, but my friend is smart and she's 15, so she don't go to jail because she's too young. So
And how old were you?
I was 16 going on 17 at that time. And so even though it was just for a few hours, but I still had to go on Grand and Central. And just because of that, I actually got kicked out of Prosser. And then I had to go to Austin Career. So
And that was considered your neighborhood school?
yes, yes, because I'm from the Austin community.
Okay. So for those of you, again, not familiar with the system, Chicago has what's considered neighborhood high schools. Every community is supposed to have one, even though
Mm-hmm.
now I don't think as much because they have more charter schools. And you have selective enrollment schools, which are for students that are basically in the top 2% maybe of all students
Mm-hmm.
coming out of eighth grade. And then you have what used to be vocational, which are now career academy schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to be geared towards those that were going into trades. And I think they kind of sort of still are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had those schools that just kind of fell in the middle. You weren't really sure what their classifications were.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they were based more so on where you were versus your academic abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So at Austin, what was the difference between that school and Prosser?
Oh, it was a big difference. So, Process Vocational School, that is where I learned shorthand, telling my age on that. We were still, typewriting. We had to go to an electrical, like 6 weeks or like 8 weeks doing electrical work. We had to learn wood shop. We had to learn graphic design. So, it really did teach you like specific skill sets so you can determine what type of career path you wanted versus when you got to Austin Career Center. It really was just a group of people who got kicked out or had to leave their schools, their neighboring high schools for whatever reason. Still a great group of children, but it was just a difference as far as like the education that was provided. But they did have a class that I think it was financial education that I thought was interesting because PRASA didn't have that class. So each experience there was good and bad out of it. But just with Austin Career, I was like in my junior year when I got kicked out of Prosser, so I couldn't graduate with my class that I had like grew up with. So even though I graduated from Austin Career, I didn't know the children. I didn't know the students. So it was like bittersweet because I was just at a school with people I didn't know. So
Do you feel that under different circumstances, meaning if you had had parents that were more in tune with the education system, etc., that perhaps you would have been allowed to stay at Prosser?
I don't want to put that pressure or blame on my parents. I think it was just bad decision making on my behalf. Maybe if I just understood that don't make everybody problem your problem. Like it simply was my bad choice of decisions.
Not to put the pressure or blame on your parents, but actually, I'm looking at it from an inequity in the system, not the parents,
Mhm.
because when I went to school, most of our parents were attorneys,
Mhm.
judges, teachers. I'll say a lot.
Mhm.
And that dictated how we were treated compared to perhaps some other students at different schools because you're going to be careful when
Mhm.
Jesse Jackson's son is in this school.
Mhm.
He was
Mhm.
in the class ahead of me. We had an ideology that we didn't even recognize that we had for some of us
Mhm.
because just like we talk about other people's privilege, we had privilege that we didn't recognize either.
Mhm.
And having a good friend that went to Crane, for example, and we fought Crane on a regular basis on that 126 Jackson
Mhm.
bus. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my God, are we doing this again? Not realizing that the community had been initially told, from what I understand, that the building that became Whitney Young was going to be the new Crane.
Mm.
And instead of it being that school and just move them down the street, you not only made it a high school of a whole different name and demographic, but you didn't let most of the kids that would have been in the building even attempt to get in.
Yeah.
And so you had a situation where there were class issues that I know I didn't know what was going on. I just knew we had to fight every so often, and that's just what it was. Now, in once you finished at Austin,
Mm-hmm.
what did life look like?
Hmm. Honestly, life looked it just like I completed the expectation of graduating from high school and really just raising my child. I really did not, again, understand my superpower. I didn't understand who I was. I knew that I was a little bit different mentally, but no one at that time had really um made me feel like different or special or like I had anything that was like extraordinary. So really that was it. I was just going to just be a regular human being. Just that's it.
So at Austin, no one said, okay, it's time, because the beginning of my senior year, we ended up having a school strike.
Mhm.
And we were like hysterical because we were like, oh my God, we can't get our college applications in on time because whatever the deadlines were, blah, blah, blah. Because that was the expectation
Mhm.
that you were going to go to college somewhere.
Mhm.
Did that conversation come up for you at Austin?
No, it wasn't. If it did, it wasn't memorable, right? It wasn't a sit down where it's like, "Hey, Renetta, I see so much in you. I noticed on your test scores you score high." And like it wasn't those type of conversations at all.
So when you said, okay, I've met the baseline,
Mhm.
I've gotten out of school,
Yeah,
I have my child, what else were you doing?
I was just working.
What were you working as?
So during that time, like I've started working actually at 14 because I just always wanted my own money, and I wasn't even supposed to be working at Wendy's,
I'm
but
about to say, was that legal? A
But
child
I
down
know,
in
right? I told a story for Wendy's. They didn't used to do it, didn't have all that technology back then. I said I was 16. Wendy hired me. It used to be a Wendy's on Central over the bridge. And so I knew that, working it came natural to me because I saw both of my parents working. So I didn't have a problem with working. I had a child to take care of. So I just would just always get good jobs because of the training at Prosser. I would always get a good customer service job because I knew how to work on computers. So that was a benefit of going to a vocational school. Like I would always get a good secretary or customer service job or some type of job where I was sitting down at a desk.
As you said, you moved away from the row houses, but not that far.
Hmm.
Once you finished high school, did you go back home were you still at the home where you had grown up in with your parents, or were you living by yourself in an apartment?
Yeah, so I got an apartment at 19. By me always having those great jobs, then when I got my first big income tax, I was like, I'm going to get me a studio apartment, and I left home at like 18. Stayed with my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband of 25 years, and I got me a studio apartment.
When did you shift
Mm.
from I had these good jobs, I'm getting a decent salary to but this is not what God put me here to do? When did that shift become something you were aware of?
Hmm. Yeah. So there's two major shifts in my life. The first shift was when my sister asked me, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, what do you mean what I'm going to do?
How old were you?
I was maybe 24.
Okay. So you were at that point still working the jobs and making decent money.
Yeah. But she was like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, what do you mean what I'm going to do? And she's like, you're so smart. And I was like, you think I'm smart? And she was like, yeah. And now here's someone who never been to college, but she was like, you should go to college. And
Keep talking.
it was at that time where that was really the first time I remember somebody saying to me, like, you should go to college. So when she said you should go to college, for some reason, the next like week or so, a College of DuPage pamphlet came in the mail, and I was like, "Wow, somebody actually think I'm smart and that I should go to college." And I filled out the application, learned how to fill out the FAFSA application, and I was in college. But it just took one conversation of somebody looking at me and saying, "You playing yourself short. Like, what are we doing?"
What was the second life change for you?
The second life change was when I was finally in corporate, and I realized I was faster than everybody else. I was sharper than everybody else. And I was just like, I'm different. Right. And I literally knew like working for someone was just not for me, because I would always get told after I finally got an associate's degree and I would go on these corporate jobs, they would always say, you need more education, more education. But I'm like, but I'm excelling at all of the jobs. I'm getting top performance, but you steady telling me I need more and more education. And so I just knew that there was something wrong with that system. I didn't like to gossip a lot. And so I was never part of the inner cliques because I didn't like the gossip. And I just did not like the corporate setting. And so um, that second shift was when I was turning 40. I knew that I was a communicator. I knew I was a writer. And so that's when I was like, I'm turning 40. I want to publish my story. I'd had this story on this USB for years. And I want to give myself a birthday gift at the age of 40 and publish my book.
Now, I'm going to come back to this book.
Mm-hmm.
When your sister told you, you are so smart, why are you still working these jobs?
Mm-hmm.
What did she see around her and you that pushed her to push you? What was the average one of your friends doing at that time?
So I always traveled in small groups. Like, I'm an introvert. A lot of people don't believe that. So it wasn't even like the friends. It was just me. Like, I literally, and this is going to help somebody out there, because somebody, I'm sure they can ex- identify. I literally just wanted to be a ghetto fabulous chick. Like,
Wait, define that for those that don't
I wanted
know.
my hair done, my nails done. I wanted just always to look fly when I go somewhere. And I always gonna have some money in my pocket because I had a job, but that's literally was my only desire at that time. And so she just was like, "Okay, you cute, you fly, but that's it." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "No,
No.
no." But that was my mindset at the time, because again, no one had ever my outspokenness was looked at as bossy or looked at as a problem child. Me being very opinionated was looked at as a problem child. So I didn't see those as superpowers.
And again, I'm going to use a comparison
Mm-hmm.
because this is where I want not just educators,
Mm-hmm.
but people in general to understand how classism shapes
Mm-hmm.
other people's realities.
Yeah.
So, for those of us that were chatty in
Mm-hmm.
school,
Mm-hmm.
and I even had clutch to pearls. I had a little smart mouth and an attitude. Oh my goodness. I was put on the debate team.
Big difference.
Big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And to show you how, and my mother to this day, I promise you, because we fight about this all the time, calls herself the poor little girl from Natchez, Mississippi. I'm like, stop it. You were not a poor little girl from wherever. But we had actually debated at DuSable Museum
Mm-hmm.
against another school, and I won a scholarship in the debate.
Wow.
To show you how my mother's mentality was,
Mm-hmm.
she told me, leave that scholarship for somebody that needs it.
Mm.
We got you for college.
Wow.
And honestly, again, looking back, I can agree, but I was kind of pissed off. I'm like, I worked my tail off for this.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is you're having those same or similar skill sets
Mm-hmm.
weren't recognized, whereas mine were pushed in this direction.
Yes.
And for those of you that are mad with Bill Cosby, don't be mad right now for this moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
There was an episode of the Cosby Show where Vanessa was talking about, people saying, "Oh, she's a rich girl," blah blah blah. And he's like, "Well, tell them you don't have anything. Tell me your
Mm-hmm.
parents are rich.
Right. I remember that.
You don't have a thing."
Right.
I can't say it, the expectation at that time for us was not about their money so much,
Mm-hmm.
but it was about you understood that the continuum
Mm.
was going to be your parents did this and they are
Mm-hmm.
middle class. You may not do exactly what they did, but you're still going to be middle class
Yeah.
or upper middle class.
Mm-hmm.
And they made allowances for certain talents that, like you said, in other settings would have been problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that some of us didn't chat our way into detention or whatever,
Yeah.
but most of the time that I saw, it was turned into a different ideology.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do as a career path? We had a young man, I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but when I tell you, he put HBCU drum majors to shame and he was still in high school, it was ridiculous.
Mm.
But he had that opportunity to shine like
Mm-hmm.
that. And unless you went to a school where there was someone who had an HBCU background and could recognize that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure if that was encouraged. So you went from Prosser to Austin,
Mm-hmm.
from Austin to working decent jobs, going
Mm-hmm.
back to school,
Mm-hmm.
then basically being told, we know you can do all of this because you've done all of this, but we want you to have a little more paper behind your name,
Mm-hmm.
which I have my thoughts about having paper behind your name. Not to
Yeah.
say it's a bad thing, but it's not the end all be all either.
Correct.
To approaching your 40th birthday and saying, I have a story in me that I feel is worth telling.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you feel that your story was that important?
And guess what? It was like a fiction story, right? It wasn't even a story for me, but it was just something that I had created, that I wanted to tell. And I just felt like I want to tell this story. This story is so good. I want to complete it. I want to share it. And so again, I put it on a USB. I would lose the USB. I would put it in different purses, pockets, everything. And then one day it was like a week before my 40th birthday, and I found the USB, and I was like, "This is it. I'm gonna publish this book because if I lose this USB one more time,
That's it.
this story ain't gonna be there." And I remember I heard this lady say that she used to always pray like, I want to make $100,000. I want to make $100,000, and she had her story in her trunk in a notebook. And I just remember her saying that when she published her story, she made $100,000. So this whole time she was praying for $100,000 and to be a six-figure person,
It was
she was
riding in her
riding around in
trunk.
the trunk with it, in her notebook,
100K was in the trunk.
in a trunk. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, I definitely got to, finally publish this book that I've had on this USB for years.
How many siblings do you have?
I have one sister and two brothers.
Are they all still, God please, with us?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they now?
They're all here in Illinois, actually.
Okay. Has anyone besides you, and I'm going to segue into where you are today,
Mm-hmm.
gotten off that corporate horse or that management track at Jewel, wherever? Have they become entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I love that question um, because of my entrepreneur endeavors, my sister, she retired 4 years ago, and she now has a cafe in Fox Valley Mall, and it's called Banana Pudding Twist. And that was purely because she saw little sis become a full-time entrepreneur and make more money working for herself than I ever made working for someone else. And she said, "You not finna leave me behind."
Now we already told what you sort of kind of doing, but not quite.
hmm
Let's go back to that book that was on that USB that you kept losing and
Yeah,
finding again.
yeah,
How did you figure out how to get that from the USB to a true book?
yes. So here's a disclaimer. I'm not putting religion on anyone, but I have to tell it the way it happened. Okay. So I go back and I start looking for publishing houses that I had started and stopped the process with, and it just wasn't working. Either their customer service was bad or their company was shut down altogether. So I go into prayer and I'm like, Lord, I just want to publish my book and it's just not working. And literally, I heard God say, it's not working because I want you to be a publisher. I told God, wrong person. Wrong
Ooh,
person.
ooh, you got
Right
more nerve than a
idea.
whole lot of folks.
Wrong
Ooh.
person. He was like, no, I actually have a lot of people that need to tell their story. And I need to send someone in to help them that has integrity. I'm not the only one, but he was like, I literally want you to be a publisher. So I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to try it. And I'm like, well, if you want me to be a publisher, you got to give me a name. And then he was like, Sophisticated Press. So I go to Google and I look up Sophisticated Press. And it's hard to go on Google and look up something that's nothing there. So I look up Sophisticated Press and there's nothing there that says Sophisticated Press. So my cousin, Rosina Pierce, is a trademark lawyer. I immediately say, okay, I'm going to make it an LLC and then I'm going to get it trademarked. And I published my book under there. And that's when the magic started happening.
How long did it take from your publishing your first book
Mm-hmm.
to today? What was the growth and development of Sophisticated Pub Press?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just go back to answer a little bit of the other question too. Uh, what I also had to do at the time is I had to turn off the radio. We were still in the WGCI days and all of that stuff, right? So I had to turn off the radio and I had to literally self-educate. And this is why it's so important for I'll tell everyone, yes, you can have teachers in your life, but the best education is self-education because you know what you want. You know what type of success and results you want. And so you just have to utilize and go to YouTube University and teach yourself because it's nobody's responsibility to teach you everything. You have an obligation to teach yourself. So that's how I learned the process of self-publishing, learned the process of creating contracts, learn the process of graphic design and hiring freelance workers and things like that. But to answer your second question, give me that question one more time.
From publishing your first book, what
hmm
year was that
That was 7 years ago.
to now?
hmm
Because a lot of people see entrepreneurship
Yeah.
and they see the now.
hmm hmm
They see, like you said, oh, she's flossing, she's dressed, her hair, her nails, she's going on big trips,
Right.
etc. They don't see those days of crying,
Yeah.
like I said, for both of us praying,
Yeah.
those days of, Lord, are you sure?
hmm
were you really telling me to do this? Did I hear you right? Because
hmm
this seems to be getting kind of rocky. They don't see any of those rough times.
Yeah.
So, what did you endure and overcome to get from that first published book, which was yours,
hmm
to now? How was that first book received, firstly?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Absolutely. So when I published the first book, it was done. It was ugly. It was short. It was all wrong, but it was a book, right? And so I tell everybody, present is better than perfection. It was present. I had a tangible in my hand. And so once I did that, the miseducation that I didn't have actually was a bonus. Because sometimes you can be too educated and you come into a system and you trying to be just logical and things like that. My ignorance of the publishing industry, because at that time, present day, I did not know it was $120 billion industry that I was entering in. That by me not knowing that, I wasn't scared to enter it. Right. By me not knowing that it was Caucasian ran majority, I wasn't scared to know that I was a minority entering into this industry, right? Had I known that, I probably would have felt less than and unqualified. So sometimes your ignorance is a gift, because now you don't have all of those um prerequisites that you're trying to meet and the criteria you're trying to meet. And so when I came and I published that book, the power of the internet immediately made me global before I became local. Because once I published it, I first had told my director, she was my first black director, I dedicated the book to her because I never had a female African American director. When I did that on the job, my book actually ended up getting me fired
Oh,
because, but in a good way, that's a little tagline. Because when I did the book, it showed my director at the time that she has project management skills. She has team building skills because she had to have a team to help her build this book. She has leadership skills because even though I was working at one of the biggest MCOs in Illinois, everyone there had doctorates, but no one there had a book. So instantly that book set me apart from everybody in the office that was young. And I would never be in line to get promotions because I didn't have the degrees, right? And I didn't have the seniority. But once I gave that book and I showed my director, it made me start getting stretch assignments. And then next thing you know, now I'm an interim supervisor. But that would not happen if I had not brought the book into my director's office and said, look what I did.
tell me what happened though that led you to no longer be in their employ.
Yeah. So immediately people around the world and like my women's group, they would say, can you help me? Can you help me do my book? I got a story to tell. And wherever you go, if you ask the majority of people, they want to write a book. They have a book. They've been told their life story is a book. The statistics show that 85% of people want to write a book, but only 5% follow through. Right. And so once they saw just somebody who had accomplished that um that publishing a book, I started getting calls from Oakland, from Texas, from Atlanta. Can you help me? Can you help me? Just from being in different women groups. And so the demand for me teaching people how to write a book became so prevalent that it was more money helping people tell their story than staying on the job.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel that having a background that was not rock hard, I'm not saying
Mhm.
you were out there just, scratching and surviving, which anybody knows me knows I'm not for that.
Mhm,
but
mhm,
but still having not a cush lifestyle either.
mhm.
Do you feel that that grit was added to what helped you step out on your own? Because sometimes people are so comfortable, they are afraid to risk it.
Yeah. You know what did it for me? When I would see my leaders walk into a boardroom, I would get mad because I felt like I deserved to be in that boardroom. Like I wanted to be in the boardroom. Like, why I'm not in the boardroom? I'm smart. So it was little things like that. Again, like once my sister told me that, she ignited something in me and I realized like, wait, low key, I'm really dope. So why I'm not, being looked at or being utilized properly. So it was those type of things that got me to really see like, no, something is off a little bit because I can give more, I can do more, but I can't be seen because I need a degree, and I can't be seen because I need this. And so that's what did it for me, just when I would get overlooked. Now, at first, when I was growing up, it was okay to overlook me. But once I realized I have something to contribute and you're not utilizing it, then I would take it personal. Like you want me in your boardroom, but I wasn't getting invited into the boardroom.
We have a few more things I want to touch on.
Okay.
For those young people, because although we are almost in 2025
Mm-hmm.
and life has changed on some levels tremendously.
Yeah.
I was in high school with flow charts for computer and oh my gosh, for was it basic and Fortran and all this kind of stuff, things that are unheard of now.
Yeah.
But even with that, we still have that group of children that are being raised in impoverished circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
those that are being raised in working class circumstances, those that have been raised in middle class, and those that have been raised in upper class.
Yeah.
What do you feel, despite any of that, can be a great equalizer so that I may not come from a family with money, but I can be the first in my family to get money?
Yeah. I think we need to understand that sometimes your poverty is your superpower. And you're going to keep hearing me saying that a lot because everything is perception. And so poverty creates creativity. Poverty creates a desire and a strong passion for things. And so if you look at poverty the wrong way, then you'll say, I'm a victim, why is this happening to me? But remember our ancestors, they was in poverty, but they had the most patents. They had the most like creativity that came out of poverty, out of the struggle. And so you have to just change your perception. So I think that when you grow up in poverty, you learn how to adapt. You learn how to, like I said, be creative. You learn how to pull from your intelligence and get whatever you want. Same way if mama don't have money to buy a whole bunch of food, but she just got some flour and she got a pack of ramen noodles and she got like she gonna get creative, right? But that's out of poverty. And so learning how to embrace the poverty is something that I think that we need to tell our youth so they won't look at it as being something that's a curse, but it's actually a gift because when you finally do get to the boardroom table and things like that, you're quicker and you're sharper because you had to figure it out.
And for those of you that are not interested in quote unquote the corporate boardroom itself, make your own boardroom table.
Correct.
Because in looking at how technology is,
Mm-hmm.
you have Instagram giants,
Yeah.
and they are typically, I want to say, is a generation, not even the millennials, what are they, Gen Zs?
Mm-hmm.
And there are drastic changes
Yeah.
in how you can become fiscally viable.
Yes.
Back when I was young, if you were not quote unquote smart, so okay, so and so is gonna be a doctor, a lawyer, things along that way,
Mm-hmm.
it was they were pushing athletics.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with either one of those paths. But for athletes, we know one real injury and you're out.
Yeah.
You're out the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a system upon which you can fall back on, then you have trouble.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about the system that you have created,
Mm-hmm.
how many people have you helped tell their story,
Yeah.
author the book of their dreams,
Mm-hmm.
get out there and get published in front of the world? How many authors have you dealt with in 7 years?
Yeah. So easily 300 leaders and mothers and fathers and politicians and now retired NBA coaches telling their story, not only telling their story, but owning their intellectual property. I think it was Warren Buffett who said the greatest investment is in your brain. And we have so many people that benefit off our story, off our struggle, off our just creativity, and we don't own it. And so what makes sophisticated press unique is we teach you, like, yeah, I know it's cool to say you're getting a book advance and all of that, but you don't know what comes with that book advance, that traditional publishing. Like once they give you that book advance, then now they get to, whoever put the money down gets to tell you how the project gonna go. So if you get the book advance, they're going to tell you how they want your editing to sound. They're going to tell you how they want your cover to look. They're going to get majority of the money because they invested more in you than you did yourself. And so we teach the power of self-publishing because now you own your story. Now you are the person who's getting the royalties directly. Now you are actually entering into entrepreneurship because we believe every business should have a book and every book is a business. So what makes us unique is we teach you the business of books, how to be an entrepreneur, how to create multiple streams of income from one book. And now we actually have began to create a curriculum that's going to teach you how to make 30 streams of income from one book.
For those that look at your life and go, she's the exception, because we are quick to say, oh, that's just her. What about everyone
Yeah.
else? What do you say to those creatives, those entrepreneurs
Yeah.
that you grew up with? Because this is not necessarily a popular view, but I'm going to tell it because it's the truth.
Yeah.
Even the street pharmaceutical
Mhm.
salesman was an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
He was just dealing in a product that was illegal.
Correct.
So when you look at those people that grew up around you, do you see a lot of entrepreneurs at this point?
Absolutely. And I would just say, you know, you're talking to someone that was considered a project baby, right? Who is now a publisher. And I'm here to tell you that the same way my sister told me, "What are you gonna do?" and "You're so much smarter." If you're listening to my voice, I just want to ask you the same thing and into the camera and ask you, like, "What are you gonna do? You're so much smarter." And it's okay to be ghetto because there was a time when I was a ghetto, but your ghetto-ness can also turn into greatness. And so you don't have to stop there. And really, even ghetto is a perception because look, I have red hair. And some people will say this is ghetto, but actually, this my signature of freedom. I don't fit the corporate, criteria of having black hair, brown hair. Like, no, my red hair shows you that I'm my own boss. I can do what I want to do. I don't fit your box. And so I just want to tell them that use your uniqueness as a gift and don't let that make you feel less than. That's actually your superpower.
Tell us how to reach your sister.
Yes, so she's on Facebook as Banana Pudding Twist, and she's actually in Fox Valley Mall, right next to Macy's. They have a Panera, the old Panera Bread store, over 4,000 square feet. So definitely go there. Their banana pudding is addictive, and if you don't like bananas, they have other treats as well.
Okay. Now, one last question
Mm-hmm.
before we get into how they can get in touch with you to get whatever their story is, be it
Mm-hmm.
fiction, be it memoir, be it children's books, whatever that is, how they can get in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
We are almost in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself and sophisticated press in 5 years?
Love that story. So, in the next 5 years, I see Sophisticated Press being one of the number one self publishing platforms in the world. My mission is to help minorities, and that does not just mean African Americans, that's for Latinas, that's for Chinese, that's for American Indians, to be able to see themselves as main characters in children's books because actually minorities see animals more in children's books as main characters than themselves. So my mission is just to add that diversity representation in cookbooks, in business books, in children's books. And so I'm going to incorporate in technology, AI, and I'm just going to actually revolutionize how self-publishing is done in the world.
For those people that have a story somewhere in them and just don't know how to go about getting it out,
Yeah.
how do they reach you?
You want to reach me? I'm going to give you my number, right? This is my business number, 630-755-5580. Give me a call. I'm going to actually answer the phone and talk to you. You can also visit us at www.sophisticatedpress.com, or you can contact me at Renetta Gunn Stevens on Facebook.
And that's Stevens with a V
Yes,
and not a
Stevens with the V.
PH. Well, I thank you so much, Miss Renetta,
Thank you.
because I know I'm looking forward to some projects that we're working on that will
Mhm.
be done by the end of this year. She already told me I can't say anything about it yet, so that's why I'm not saying anything about it. But we will be back to discuss it once
Mhm.
it is completed and out there.
Yes.
I appreciate your coming on the show today to show people your beginnings can be, well, they no, your beginnings are the fertile soil for you to grow into your now if you know how to work the soil correctly.
Absolutely.
So, as you said, find your superpower and make it happen.
Yes.
And with that, this is your girl, Bria Ray Harris Yarbrough, coming to you on IntellectualRadio.com, an iHeartRadio station on the Quintessential Queens show. I'm not going to be here next week. I don't think Dee should probably be here with another segment. But until whenever you see me, peace and blessings in the name of Jesus. We'll talk with you soon.
Get your glow up. One time for the babies on the south side.